to point out my humiliation to those mortals. Be careful, Skull.
After the letdowns of Morbius and Blade Trinity's portrayal of Drake, it looks like we might finally get a Dracula movie with either Keanu Reeves or Tom Ellis in the lead. But first of all, who is Marvel's Dracula? Dracula in Marvel Comics was created by Jerry Conway and Gene Colan, debuting in The Tomb of Dracula in April 1972, co-written by Marv Wolfman. A different version of Dracula had appeared earlier in Atlas Comics, Marvel's predecessor, in Suspense No. 7 in 1951, in a story titled Dracula Lives by an unknown writer and artist. Marvel was initially blocked from publishing vampire comics by the Comics Code Authority, but in early 1971 the rules changed, allowing characters from established literature. That year, Morbius the Living Vampire showed up in The Amazing Spider-Man, and later, Dracula got his own series. The Tomb of Dracula ran until issue number 70 in 1979, and also appeared in Dracula Lives, a black and white horror comic series from 1973 to 75. These two titles sometimes overlapped, with storylines connecting. At first, The Tomb of Dracula kept itself separate from Marvel's other heroes. Marv Wolfman mentioned that it was tricky enough creating suspense in a comic without mixing in superheroes, but eventually, Dracula made his first crossover appearance in Giant-Size Spider-Man No. 1 in 1974. Marvel also adapted the Dracula novel in Marvel Classic Comics No. 9 in 1977. In The Tomb of Dracula, in the later part of the 20th century, Dracula was brought back to life by Clifton Graves and once again clashed with Quincy Harker and Rachel Van Helsing. After taking control of the Cult of the Darkhold, Dracula sought the power of the Darkhold book to eliminate his vampiric weaknesses and become truly immortal. However, his plans were continuously thwarted by the X-Men, the now vampire Rachel Van Helsing, Lilith, Thor, Doctor Strange, Hannibal King, and the Avengers. Dracula is one of the strongest beings on Earth, so even the best efforts to defeat him were tough. He gained his vampire powers after being turned by the vampiress Lianda, and later grew even stronger through Varney's power. Dracula's abilities are way beyond those of most vampires. He's incredibly strong. He's even fought and beaten Colossus in one-on-one combat. On top of that, he's super fast, has endless stamina, quick reflexes, and can fly. He doesn't age, can't get sick, and is immune to most injuries. Conventional attacks can't kill him or cause permanent damage. Dracula is almost immune to most attacks, and thanks to his healing factor, he can quickly repair any damage to his body. He can control the minds of others and command animals like rats, bats, and wolves. With a few exceptions, he can also control other vampires. Anyone he bites becomes mentally influenced by him, and he can even hypnotize people with just a glance. He can shapeshift into a bat, either regular or human-sized, a wolf, or turn into a fog or mist, all while keeping his intelligence. He can also control the weather, including summoning electrical storms. Like many vampires in other stories, Dracula has no reflection in mirrors and can't be captured on film. He's also a highly skilled fighter and swordsman with centuries of experience in hand-to-hand combat and military strategy, especially from the 15th century. Dracula is incredibly smart and was tutored in Transylvania during his youth. His powers have been amplified and his weaknesses lessened by magical sources, such as the Darkholder's spells. Dracula needs to drink fresh blood to survive, and he can't handle direct sunlight. During the day, he falls into a coma-like state and has to stay in contact with his native soil. He also has some major weaknesses. Garlic can repel him and stop him from changing forms, while silver and wood cause him intense pain. Wood only causes serious pain unless it pierces his heart. Religious symbols, when held by someone who believes in their power, can also hurt him. To kill him, you can either decapitate him or drive a wooden stake or silver blade through his heart. Additionally, he can be destroyed by the Montesi formula, a spell from the Darkhold discovered by Brother Montesi. Speaking of the wakefulness, did you know? The MCU just confirmed a major vampire weakness even before Blade makes his debut. While Blade's movie is still over a year away, the MCU has already revealed an important vampire vulnerability. Vampires in comic books have a bunch of different myths and legends tied to them, some that are pretty common in fiction and others that are unique to Marvel. Plus, Marvel has explored different types of vampires, from classic bloodsuckers to daywalkers like Blade, and even pseudo-vampires like Morbius who changed their DNA. So far, the MCU has only teased vampires, with mentions of them in Werewolf by Night and now Agatha All Along. There's still a lot to learn about vampires in the MCU, but it's clear they exist in the supernatural realm. For now, they've only shown up in these smaller projects, but when Blade finally hits the screen, the MCU will need to lay out how vampires fit into the bigger picture. The MCU just dropped an interesting tidbit: witches are immune to vampire bites. Even though vampires haven't been a big part of the MCU yet, the recent Agatha All Along reference gives us some crucial info. In the show, Lilia Calderu, played by Patti LuPone, is one of the witches Agatha brings into her coven. In episode 4, Lilia mentions that she was bitten by a vampire before, but clearly she didn't turn into one. This reveals that magic might be a weakness for vampires in the MCU. Agatha All Along is the latest series diving into the magical and supernatural side of the MCU, something that's barely been explored in the larger context of the Infinity and Multiverse sagas. While 2025's Ironheart is said to include some supernatural elements, with Anthony Ramos as the Hood, and Mahershala Ali's Blade is still on the horizon, I'm really curious to see what else the MCU has planned in the supernatural realm. A Scarlet Witch movie would be amazing, depending on how things wrap up in Agatha All Along, and I'd love another season of Moon Knight, or even more spooky specials like 2022's Werewolf by Night. Normally, a vampire bite is a sure way for a human to become a vampire, so Lilia's situation suggests she found a way to avoid the transformation. Since she's a witch, it's likely she used magic to prevent it. In the comics, though, there are only a few ways revealed that can cure a vampire or stop someone from becoming one of these immortal creatures of the night. In Marvel Comics, vampires come in different forms, but for clarity, we're focusing on the classic blood-sucking, night-dwelling vampires. These creatures have caused trouble in the supernatural realm and even crossed paths with heroes like Black Widow. Despite the challenges, heroes have found ways to fight the vampire curse and cure the disease. For example, in Black Widow's case, a sterilized sample of the Hulk's radioactive blood was used to stop her from transforming. The radiated blood burns away the vampire cells before they can take hold, suggesting that Bruce Banner's blood is both immune to vampirism and a useful preventative tool. But for those who have already fully transformed, there's still hope. Killing the vampire who sired them can reverse the change. Additionally, the heart-shaped herb from Wakanda has been known to cure vampirism in some instances. This could be a way for the MCU to introduce some of these cures before Blade arrives. The MCU still hasn't fully established how vampires fit, and with Blade on the horizon, that's something that needs to be addressed. Vampires in stories tend to have different variations of their lore, whether they can walk in the sunlight, are weak to magic, or can survive on alternative blood sources. All of this can change depending on the story being told. Since vampires are a relatively new concept in the MCU, there's a lot of room for creative interpretation. However, given how iconic vampires are in fiction, there are certain expectations when it comes to these creatures. Marvel has a chance to lay the groundwork for how vampires work before Blade hits theaters, but most of the deep dive into vampire lore will likely happen in the upcoming film. Since Blade is a half-vampire whose backstory is closely tied to vampires, the movie will need to establish where vampires fit in the larger MCU, how they've remained hidden until now, and how they survive, and most likely, we'll see Dracula in the movie as well, hopefully played by Keanu Reeves or Tom Ellis in the lead. Well, that's it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more updates on this and other exciting upcoming movies. See you next time.